Hello, my name is Robert Mandick, former mayor of Huntington Beach, and it's my honor to be introducing you to our 25th mayor of Huntington Beach, Robert Lambert. Everybody called him Bob. He served as Huntington Beach mayor in 1962. He was on the city council from 1958 to 66. And Bob Lambert came into town at a young age, and he actually was born and raised at the corner of Talbert and Beach, and they had a Texaco station that he ran with his family, and their house is also there. Right now is the former, actually the Wiener Schnitzel's there now. And during his term in office, he did some great things for the city of Huntington Beach. He also served in World War II in the Pacific as a veteran and did his duty. And some of the accomplishments he got done during his term in office: they got McDonnell Douglas to come to Huntington Beach. It was a big feather in their cap. And then also, at that time, development was going rampant in Huntington Beach. All the bean fields are turning into housing tracts. And we had a threat at that time of development on the beach, which everybody has seen at 711 Pacific Coast Highway, Ocean. And the largest landowner in Huntington Beach at that time wanted to build those kind of complexes and resorts up and down the coast all the way to Bolsa Chica. And under his term and under his tutelage, the city council stopped further development on the beach after the first development because it kind of stuck by him. So we have to thank him very much for the development of Huntington Beach and all the time he's been there. After they sold their business, their Texaco station, Bob came to work for Mandick Motors for approximately 20 years. And he's always been a lifelong friend of Mandick Motors and Huntington Beach and the Mandick family. Enjoy this episode of FlasHBack.
Reflections by Former Mayors, a show that highlights past Huntington Beach mayors as they reflect back upon their term as a civic leader. This program recounts the issues these men and women faced that helped write the pages of history of Huntington Beach. Welcome to Reflections by Former Mayors.
To Reflections by Former Huntington Beach Mayors. This program is brought to you by the City of Huntington Beach, Cable Channel 3. I'm Dr. Tom Cooper, your host for this program. And it's my pleasure now to introduce to you our guest for today, the Honorable former Huntington Beach Mayor, Robert M. Lambert. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you here today. One of the things that I was looking forward to in our getting together in this program today was to reflect back on what it was like when I first moved to Huntington Beach in 1962. And then I have a special feeling, Bob, in that when I first got involved in Huntington Beach Recreation and Parks Commission, you were mayor, or you were on the city council at that time, and were one of those individuals that was involved in my appointment on the Parks Commission. I've always appreciated that. But enough about me. I'd want to find out a little bit about you, when you first moved to Huntington Beach, what your family was involved in, and what kind of things you were doing in Huntington Beach before you ever got involved in city politics.
Well, I came to Huntington Beach as a mere infant. I was only 11 months old. My family moved down from Bakersfield, and Dad opened a service station on the corner of Talbert and Beach Boulevard, where we made our residence also. I was raised there. That was in the country in those days. Beach Boulevard was the only highway in and out of Huntington Beach. There wasn't no PCH as is today. All the traffic went out that way. So that's one of the reasons he established there. Then I went to school here, went into service, came home, took over my dad's business, and it went on.
Which service were you in? What years were that?
I was in the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
Went in 1942 and got out in 1945. And served in the South Pacific.
So you were involved then, as far as business in the city of Huntington Beach. You probably got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, or
Not too much, no.
Okay.
Chamber was very small in those days, and wasn't really too active outside of the parades and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. You say the business was at Beach and Talbert. Whatever happened to it?
We demolished, or I closed down the business in '66. I wanted to do something with the property. My mother had passed away, and so then we developed the corner, took the houses out in the station,
Mm-hmm.
and have leased the property since then.
When you're married,
Yes.
and when did you get married? After you got out of the service?
We were married in January '47.
January '47. What is your wife's name?
Jane.
Jane. And how about children?
I have two boys, Tom and Mike.
What did they do?
Tom is a security officer with the Atari Corporation, and Mike is in Santa Paula and working for Atlantic Richfield.
Do they have any children? Do you have grandchildren?
The oldest boy, Tom, is married, has one child, 10. Michael's still single.
And your wife, what does she do?
She works at Hoag Hospital as secretary.
Okay. Was your family involved with you when you first got involved with political life in Huntington Beach? Did they help you? Did they assist you or work
Well,
with
the boys were quite small. They were, 58. Tom was about 8 years old at the time. And Mike was about 5. Of course, wife was active with me, supported it. And of course, my mother was still alive, and she was, during the campaigns, why she was quite active.
One of the things that I noticed when I first moved here was that there were some very active homeowners groups that assisted with and from which individuals ran for the city council. Did you have that sort of thing when you ran for the city council? Were there homeowners groups that were active? I remember when I first moved here in '62 that I went down to down on Main Street to the post office, and I think it had a sign on the post office that said the population in Huntington Beach was right at 12,000 in 1960. So it was less than that, obviously, in 1958. So the boom hadn't hit yet, but what kind of a campaign did you run?
Well, in 1958, the north area was just newly annexed. It was primarily agricultural area. You did have some of these settlements of Liberty Park, Ocean View, and what we call Boulevard Gardens. That's up close to the Huntington Center in that area. The population had jumped from a little over 5,000 to about 10,000 with annexation. In those days, you had to be a resident of Huntington Beach for 2 years before you could run for an office. Well, after we were married, we built a house inside the old city limits of Huntington Beach. So one night, I belonged to the Ocean View Fire Department in the county in those days. One night after the meeting, got talking about the coming election, and they realized that no one in the north area was eligible to run for city council. And all of a sudden they said, well, you live in the old section of town. And I said, yes. And of course, my business was out there. I was raised. So they said, we want you to run. I said, well, if you'll help support me, why, I'll go. That's how I got, that's how I got into politics. I beat the former mayor and councilman. Later on, he got back on the council, Ted Bartlett, by 31 votes.
Oh, is that right?
He was the incumbent.
I was just going to say that in those days, I understand that, and you mentioned Ted Bartlett, I understand that some of the city business, at least on an informal basis, City Council would sometimes meet or informally gather down around the Bartlett station to talk about things. Were you a part of that?
No, that came in later on after Ted was reelected back in '66. Prior to '58, yes, some of them were there. But I was too busy with my business to linger around his.
So you were on the City Council from '58 to 1966, and you served as mayor from '62 to '64. That was a 2-year term then. When did that change?
That changed in '66. Don Shipley was the last mayor on serving a 2-year consecutive term. And then in '66, a new council came on. They decided to change it back to a 1-year office.
The council, was that when it wasn't it expanded to 7 members at that time?
Expanded to 7 members at that time.
There was a charter revision committee or something that worked back then to that put this before the public, I guess.
That's right.
You mentioned Don Shipley, and it was kind of interesting that I noticed in looking back over some of the minutes that Don, who had been actively involved in a variety of ways prior to that time, you were mayor and you were responsible for appointing Don to the, at that time, the Recreation Commission. This would have been in the fall of '63. And then I noticed that Don was elected as a member of the City Council and mayor in '64. That was pretty quick. Did you think when you appointed him as a member of the Recreation Commission that 6 or 8 months later he was going to be sitting there with you on the City Council as mayor?
No, didn't enter my mind at all.
What were some of the issues that were involved during that 8-year period of time? Some of the things that they're working on today deal with downtown redevelopment and the Bolsa Chica annexation and development, and of course our park system and those kinds of things. Were some of those things being talked about then?
We started the downtown study back in those days. We brought the Urban Land Institute in to make a study, make their recommendations. We had the Auto Club come in and run a traffic survey, make the report on the traffic flow in the downtown section. A lot of things started in those days, just a matter of trying to get things started. We even tried to start a Citrus City program, and 30 years later it finally materialized.
Was that the time, or was that the first of parking meters downtown during that period of time, or had they been here before?
They had been here before. They'd been on Pacific Coast Highway and on Main Street, and it had always been a bone of contention with the merchants, then as it is now, ruining their business. But we still had it then.
I know you were also pretty actively involved with City Council and as mayor in some of the early development of our park system. Now, the bond issue for the major development of the parks didn't come until the late '60s, but you were involved in a number of things then, buying land for Murdy Park. And
we made a arrangement with Senator Murdy for that park. He donated some ground if we would gain title to the rest of it, with the idea of making it a park. We imposed on the developers to donate a certain amount of, we wrote up in their subdivision code, that ordinance that they had to donate so much land per units or houses. We prevailed on a couple of the developers to even donate sites for fire stations. So we try to set out, we worked very close with Norm Worthy and the Recreation Commission and the school boards, trying to locate our parks close to the schools so they could be utilized year-round, and the school property. We were trying to look down the road to make a city of it, and which we can all be proud of later on. I think I'm going to pat everybody's back now that was on it with me in those days, that I think we did a pretty good job.
Well, I was thinking there was such a boom time, and the city was growing at 10 to 15,000 people a year at that time, plus annexing in some additional areas, as you've indicated, and to have some of the foresight that you've indicated as far as having the developers participate, utilizing school property or adjacent to school property for parks. I happen to have lived pretty close to the Wardlow area at that time, and I remember that was sort of our park, and we were always very happy with that. And so sometimes we think in the city that park development really began in the 70s after the bond issue, but there were a number of things that the city council was doing at that time. I know you mentioned involvement with the school districts too. You were another person who helped to revise, I'm sure, the Parks Commission so that it incorporated the school districts with membership.
They had a representative on.
And that hadn't been before.
It hadn't been done before, no.
Well, that's great. Any other issues that you might think of? One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I thought it was always kind of a neat thing, and that is some of the surfing contests and taking advantage of that sort of thing back in the 60s. Were you involved in the instituting of the surfing
Well,
contests?
it really started with the lifeguard department and the recreation department working in conjunction, and of course the city was sponsoring it, and it was quite an eventful affair. They one year we had the Duke over from Honolulu, and it always drew a big crowd, and it was an orderly crowd. We didn't have the some of the stuff that's happened in the past few years, but we did have few riots back in those days too. But
it was kind of more of the atmosphere of the Beach Boys rather than some of the other things that
that's
go.
right. Yeah.
The oil companies had been around a long, long time and still are. And I know that you were an advocate, or I believe you were an advocate, of encouraging the oil companies to do some cleanup of some unsightly areas. Do you remember anything that you were involved with that, and what kind of pressures or repercussions there may have been?
we hired one man as a oil field inspector, and he'd make reports to us on the violators of different ordinances we had, along in conjunction with the fire department. We didn't. Most of the independents reacted favorably with us. The majors was never any problem.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few of the independents that were very sloppy with their housekeeping, and we felt it was time for them to clean up the city or clean up their area, because we could see particularly the downtown area, out around the old rec center, 17th and Orange. It was looking pretty bad out there, and it took several years and perseverance, and I think they came out very well in the long run. It was a matter of just keep hammering away at them, and we had an oil field committee meet a couple of councilmen, meet with the representatives of the different oil companies and some of the independents, and we'd sit down around a table and work things out, and it worked out very well, I think.
Were you involved in bringing any large industry or major businesses to Huntington Beach?
Well, not directly. But the first big business came in, and we had there's no one in the city had anything to do with it I know of, but we welcomed it with open arms. That's the Douglas plant, and that was started and dedicated during my time as mayor. We had Vice President Johnson here that day for the dedication, and a week later he was the president.
Oh, yes.
So that was the first big industry we had. We had a few small ones. We had a couple of plastic plants move in, but we were trying to welcome and trying to bring industry in. But the Douglas moving in, then you could see later on what is happening in that area out there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Vice President Johnson, and a week later, of course, we're talking November of '63, as I recall, when Kennedy was shot. And so, yeah, that was tragic. Some of the other names that were involved with city government at that time, the city attorney, I believe, was Jerry Plunkett.
Well, when I went on the council, Charles Bauer was the city attorney. Was later appointed municipal court judge, later Superior Court judge. Now he's retired. We appointed Jerry Plunkett in his place, and Jerry stayed in office until '66.
And who was city manager?
We didn't have a city manager per se. Before my time, they had set up a administrative form of government, and we had the city clerk at that time, John Henderson, was the acting city administrator. And it was getting to be quite a job for John, and he indicated he wanted to retire. So we contacted the State Personnel Board, and they provided us several applicants, and we had an interview with them, and we picked Doyle Miller. And Doyle that was in '61, I believe. And Doyle was there until his term was terminated.
I believe Doyle still lives in the city.
He still lives in the city. He's quite active with the Metropolitan Water District now.
Who was the police chief?
Well, when I went on the council, that was the days we elected the police chief. Ben Delaney was the police chief. Howard Rubidoux was a captain under Ben, and decided to run for chief. Got demoted because he was defeated. Back to patrolman. And a year or two later, Ben died. And then we did the same thing, went out to the State Personnel Board to try to get us a qualified. We had to appoint somebody. We'd try to get a qualified man for an elected position. We were always hoping to get an appointed, make that appointive. And we hired Clint Wright. He'd been a former police officer in Pasadena, deputy sheriff, especially with narcotics. He was police chief in Westminster, so we hired him. And then he was in office about 2 years and came up for re-election, and Howard Rubidoux defeated him. So we were back to the deal. Then later on, Howard died, and we appointed John Seltzer then.
As you look back during your term of office as a member of the City Council and as mayor, what are some of your most favorite recollections, and perhaps what's one of your biggest or any of your frustrations that you recall?
Well, there's nothing really frustrating.
Okay. It was a good experience then.
It was a wonderful experience. It was good education. Education worth $1 million, but I wouldn't want to go through it again.
I was going to ask you if you had it to do all over again, if there's anything that you would have changed, or you'd have done everything just the same way.
Looking back, I think I'd have been the same way. There's a lot of things I feel that we did right, and I think some of the present city council got some of the same ideas I had, and I can't see where I'd have made any changes.
If you were to be asked to give some advice to the current city council, what would you say?
Well, I don't believe in giving advice. I worked quite closely with a former councilman and mayor, and there's only about 2 times in 8 years he was on the council that I commented about anything what he'd done. I thought, well, let him row his own boat.
Well, what are you doing now? What have you been doing since you've left the city council?
Well, I got a position with Manning Motors. I'm service manager there. And the 8 years that Bob was on the council, he wasn't around the shop very long. So I had to practically ran it for him.
Well, that's great. I'm sure it was in capable hands. So what about future plans? What do you have in mind?
Well, in about another year, I hope to retire. The wife will be retiring, and we hope to do a little traveling at that time.
Any particular place in mind?
Not really, not really. Just I'd like to see the United States. I'm not too interested in seeing Europe or some of those countries, but I think there's an awful lot to see right here in this country.
So you don't have any interest in running for city council again?
Not a bit.
Well, is there anything else that you might want to mention? Anything that we haven't asked you or you'd like to comment on?
Well, not really, Tom. I can say I look back and it was a lot of fun, it was a lot of work, and I enjoyed it at the time. By the time when I get off the council, I didn't realize how tired I was. I think I slept for a week straight. But it's time consuming, and I think it takes a younger person that has the stamina to put up with it.
Of course, I noticed somewhere in the minutes that you were getting paid $125 a month or something.
Oh yeah,
then.
that was a lot of money. That came in afterwards. We started out at $50 a month.
Is that right?
And no expense money. So then the people finally said, "Well, you're putting in." We approached the people, and it was a ballot issue, and they increased our wages, and it still didn't make up for the time you spent or
Sure.
your laundry bills and whatnot.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing some of your reflections here today, and I know that our audience is going to appreciate these reflections as well, and I thank you for being here with us today, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
And thank you for letting us come into your home with this program, and a special thanks to our honorable former mayor, Bob Lambert. This program has been produced by the City of Huntington Beach, Cable Channel 3. And in the weeks to come, we'll be looking at highlights in the lives of other past Huntington Beach mayors. We hope you'll join us. This is Dr. Tom Cooper bidding you good day.